Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Patrick Duffy. Thanks for being on the show, Patrick.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Whitney.
Patrick is a full-time real estate private equity professional focused on value-add multifamily and residential development strategies nationwide. Since January 2017, he and his partners have acquired over 2,000 units. And I'm excited to get into that, Patrick. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got into the syndication business?
Sure. So I began my career in commercial real estate after graduating from college in 2013. I spent a couple of years within capital markets roles, focused on lending to real estate operators within the multifamily, commercial, office, retail, industrial spaces, as well as residential investment strategies. So that was the fix and flip and residential rental portfolio product. And growing up, my family owned a 12-unit building in Los Angeles that my grandfather had built in the 60s or late 50s. And so I had grown up seeing the power of a multifamily building and the type of passive cash flow that could provide one with. And so I was always motivated to be an owner myself one day. And certainly as I was making these loans and lending to folks within the space on the principal side of the transaction, I always wanted to be there. And I had made a career move to consumer lending. So I had some friends that were really doing a great job in the residential mortgage space. And I had loved that space and wanted to be in it myself. And then I came to realize that I'm not a salesman or just not born to be a consumer facing salesman. And I, at that moment, was inspired. I was like, you know what, I gotta get into multifamily, or I have to get into real estate investment somehow, because I don't like this lifestyle anymore. I have to get into something that I can be self-employed or my own boss and control my own destiny a little bit. And so that really occurred kind of mid 2016. And I started reaching out to some people that I had lent to prior, asking them how they got started or what steps they would recommend that I take if I wanted to get started on the principal side of the transaction. And they gave me some good advice with regard to partnering and what might be available from folks that could raise the equity for a deal that I found. And so I started doing some searching, and I came across Michael Blanc, who had a partnering portal and program that if you brought a transaction that met a certain return criteria, he would then raise the equity for that transaction. And so I got to work kind of consuming all of his material and modeling and getting sharp on that. And luckily, since I had come from the lending world, I understood how to model cash flow and all of the things of that go along with that. And so I felt pretty comfortable there. But I did certainly learn some of the due diligence steps that were associated with confirming projections, confirming expenses, and things of that nature. And towards the end of 2016 there, I found a transaction that seemed to pencil out, submitted it for review. It got kind of the green light, and submitted an LOI on that deal, and we got an accepted LOI back New Year's Day 2017. And so that I literally started at the beginning of 2017, and with Michael, we closed that deal mid-April of 2017. He raised 100% of the equity, and I managed all of the due diligence steps and the closing, and continue to act as the primary asset manager for that deal today. And throughout 2017, I had mentioned to you that we had close to about 2,000 units under contract. At one point or throughout the course of the year, we ended up closing on just over 500 units. And my partners in those deals were involved in other transactions that, and they closed approximately 2,000 units over the course of the year. So part of it, I'm part of a pretty active group of investors and out there doing a lot of stuff, whereas my focus is more on kind of the day-to-day asset management of our properties to make sure that they're performing as intended, but looking to get out into the acquisition mode pretty soon now. So yeah, that's how I got into it, and kind of up to the present day a little bit.
Well, I've heard your story before, and it's very impressive. But but tell me, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on like why Michael, said, okay, I'll partner with this guy, or you contact him, you send him this deal, you all do this together, which is an awesome way to make it happen and get into the business. But not just everybody is able to just partner right in with somebody and just start making big things happen and have that many doors under your belt and just be full time into the business that fast. So will you elaborate on what Michael's seen in you and how you did that to make that partnership work and be beneficial to somebody like him, so you could get into the business?
Sure. So and I appreciate the compliment. I was certainly hungry. I was extremely motivated to get out of my W-2 employment lifestyle and become self-employed and working on multifamily full-time. So I think that hunger may have been noticeable, and my ability to originate transactions within the market, I think maybe was seen as an asset, as well as kind of my ability. I just, it's the one underlying thing that I'd say is that all of the learning that I did about multifamily prior to getting in a first deal was eclipsed by the learning that occurred once I was in that first deal. And the learning associated with once you're actually under contract and what does that look like in order to get to the closing table is something that is, I think, glossed over a little bit, but it is so crucial to actually consummating a transaction. There's so much that occurs between contract and closing that really, it was kind of baptism by fire in many ways. You get thrown into it and you have to make it happen so that it does close. That just getting under contract does not guarantee a close. So maybe the ability to work through some of that adversity and take control of that process was a differentiating factor in just kind of owning that process. But one of the things that I've found beneficial and I kind of look for and bring to people's awareness when I talk to them as they're looking to get into the space is how good they are with people, and it's something that can be developed. And that relationship building ability and rapport that you can develop with someone really plays a beneficial role once you're in a market, because there have been opportunities that have been provided to us for acquisition that we may not otherwise would have had unless I was able to kind of establish relationships there. And so our biggest acquisition in 2017 in December was a 321 unit property. And we were able to win that because we had actually been brought it off market. And it ended up going with a different broker on market, but we had enough look at the story and underwriting that we were able to be very aggressive in our bidding. Whereas if we didn't have that relationship and weren't able to move on it as quickly, we may have lost out. And so I think maybe that was seen as an asset. And if someone's looking to be of value to a partner or a potential partner, I'd say that your ability to source quality transactions that are well vetted and you have an understanding of in your market is going to be invaluable. You can't necessarily just say to someone, if they say, well, what can you do for me? Well, I can bring deals. Well, so can LoopNet. LoopNet can bring more deals than you could ever bring. You have to be a more qualified vetter of those deals and bring more value just beyond a pro forma. You have to be a better provider or a presenter of opportunity in bringing it to a partnership, especially if you're looking for that partner to provide all the equity and potentially the debt raise for that deal. So that's what I'd say is maybe what was seen in me, but certainly as I look at other people and talk with other people, the value that they can provide really kind of stems from those items.
Yeah. And I'll have to brag on you a little bit too, though, because I know I've heard the story a few times, and Michael's talked about on his show, which I highly recommend also, is, how you already had these things kind of before he would ask for it. You kind of already had it. You were on top of things. You were getting these things for him or whatever it was. You were new into the business. You knew you needed his help, and to be able to do that, you made sure to be hungry, like you talked about, and you worked hard to be ahead of what he needed through the process.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just kind of to round it out, I think that kind of stems also from the lending background a little bit, and that you had to be prepared if credit committee came and said, what about this, this, and that? You had to have the story correct before you could actually present something for someone to consider. And I think it makes it you a better principal and acquirer of real estate, and benefits your investors by having all of those unknowns known before you actually consummate the transaction. So
awesome. Well, could you, going from your previous job, and then within a year's time, I mean, you've really, or a year and a half, whatever it is, you and partners have had so much experience. You've taken down a few deals. Help us, establish that roadmap for what other people should shoot for. Is that realistic for somebody else to shoot for, 2,000 units, or, how do we look at that?
I'll tell you what, when I started, so I was getting started in 2016. I had set out a goal, because they always talk about what is your goal. And I had set out a goal that I wanted to have 100 units by the end of 2018. And now, I mean, if I choose to participate in any acquisitions, it's getting late in the year now, but if I close on another deal, by the end of this year, I'll have well over 600 units by the end of 2018. And so there's no need to set a high number in terms of units to acquire if you're just starting out. The point is to just get started. And what I found is that it's an amazing inertia effect, in a way, is that after you buy that first transaction, people in the market immediately see that you're real and that you can close. And so they just start sending you opportunities. And you tell them what you want, and they'll send you those opportunities if they meet your bucket, or if they don't, they'll just send you opportunities. And so the 2,000 units that we had under contract throughout the course of 2017 came as a result of that first transaction, and the rest were just sent. And you kind of get into this mode, especially where I was, in that we had closed on this first deal. I knew now that I had some capital partners that would fund deals that met certain criteria. So I just started hunting for those deals. And especially after that first deal closes, you have so much confidence in that you're not dismayed at the size of a deal anymore. So, it's really, and what I tell a lot of people is that the big light bulb going off, or aha moment in my journey thus far, is that the process for closing on multifamily is the same regardless of unit size or unit count. And so, one thing that I wanted to speak to a little bit today, if you want to go there, is kind of the mindset shift that I would employ or urge new investors to take in starting off larger, not smaller. My first deal was 69 units. Second deal was 80. Third was 57, and fourth was 321. And they were all the same closing process, but the 321 has been the best experience so far, because it's provided me with the most income, and it's been great. And so today, I won't even look at, really, I don't want to look at a property that's less than 100 units. Ideally, I want to be in the 200 unit plus range. That's where I'd like to be, and a lot of my partners would like to be. And so getting back to the original question, the whole unit count thing, it starts really kind of becoming silly, because it's just a matter of number of deals that you close, and the units just kind of add up to themselves. So
I appreciate you saying that, the unit count becoming silly, because I completely agree. And I can just see it. The larger, it is the same process, whether it's 150 unit, whether it's 125, whether it's 75, so why not go larger?
That's right. And one of the other big aha moments was, and it came with the largest deal, was the benefits of scale. and the property managers that you can employ that will be attracted to that scale, and the systems that they have in place to make your life easy. And so with the 321 unit deal, we have been able to partner with a property manager that manages upwards of about 8,000 units in the Southeast. And the systems and the sophistication of their operation, because they have that size of portfolio, makes our lives as managers extremely easy. And it's actually more of a joy to work with that property manager on a 321 unit deal. We spend less time working with them than we do on our properties that are managed by a property manager with 1,000 units and is managing our 57 unit property. I know it sounds crazy, but we actually spend more time managing the day-to-day going-ons of the 57 unit than we do the day-to-day of the 321, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, but it's really been that's been a very aha moment for me as well.
Now that you've become very familiar with the syndication business, what would you say is the most difficult part?
Raising capital. I think in any syndicator that you would talk to is probably going to come back with that. The deal flow, a lot of people may say deal flow is challenging. I don't share in that necessarily. I've always been able to, I think, find pretty qualified opportunities through relationships and just kind of maybe seeing value where others didn't, without confirmation bias. So not trying to, drink my own Kool-Aid, trying to be as objective as possible. But I legitimately think there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I think that the struggle has been finding the right investor appetite for a given opportunity. And just being able to go forth and convey the benefits of multifamily and investing in multifamily syndications, as opposed to maybe some other more familiar investments like the stock market or things of that nature, is an important message to have. And the more that you can get that out into the public, I think the more investors that you win over. But really finding the right investors for the right deals and pairing those up, I think is really where the challenge exists for a lot of syndicators, including myself. There's potentially endless pools of capital out there, but just finding what opportunities meet their appetite of risk and duration of hold period, that's kind of where the challenge comes in. And sometimes it's kind of a funny process, and it's something that I think I'm getting better at, but it's still interesting to see occur. There seems to be a chicken and egg type relationship. It's you're almost expected to come with the deal in order to raise the capital, but it's done so often without a clear picture of what that capital wants. And so I feel like it would be a much better relationship by approaching the capital first and understanding what their risk tolerances are, what their return appetites and desires are, and then going and finding the transactions that meet those characteristics. But oftentimes it's done the other way. So just trying to navigate that paradigm is a little confusing at times, but I think we're getting better at it.
So from our previous conversation, and I know that a big role of yours in the business is asset management. And, I'd like for you to speak on that just a little bit, some things you've learned over the last year, just really having a big role in asset management. Give us some things that we need to know going forward, things that maybe aren't as common, that maybe you didn't know when you got started, that were maybe a surprise.
Sure. So I spoke to this, excuse me. I spoke to this briefly when I was talking about the benefits of a property manager with scale and a property with scale, and some of the benefits and sophistication that come along with that. And when it relates to asset management, I have found that the larger property that you have leads to a better property manager that you can place, and the better property manager will have more sophisticated reporting, quicker turn times on projects, better costing on projects, and ability to meet your budget much better. And so from an asset management perspective, that's now become kind of my model, in that I have a certain property manager I want to work with. I have certain reporting regimens I want to have, and want to work with them in a certain way. And with the smaller properties, I've found that the effort allocated to making sure that the reporting is correct, certain expenses are audited, our business plan is being adhered to, is a much, much greater effort. And I'd say that one of the big themes too is that the smaller properties that we bought were all close to or at stabilization at the time that we bought it. And our business plan for those properties was that through a medium kind of renovation package, we were going to be able to increase rents between $75 and $100 a month, or typically between $50 and $75. So not huge increases, but somewhat incremental increases as tenants turned over. And what I have found from an asset management standpoint is that has been extremely hard to manage, and that you can't necessarily predict the transience of certain tenants within a class of building. And trying to hit that performance metric and that type of business plan is very challenging and doesn't deliver the value to investors that I'd like to deliver. And so the 321 unit property that we bought was severely distressed, mismanaged, 68% occupied when we bought it, with a clear picture of value creation ahead of it. And in about 6 months from purchase, we're now at 97% occupied. And we've spent a large amount of capital on capital improvements. And that process has been far easier to manage just because we had a budget, a timeline, and we were able to go out and hit that. And with the right property management partner, it's made our lives much, much easier. But one of the big lessons also that I just provide other people that are maybe purchase their first asset or looking to purchase their first asset and how to asset manage is keep your property managers on a weekly or bi-weekly schedule of reporting metrics. So against your pro forma metrics to make sure that you're on task, or if they fall below a certain item, you can ask them why. Have a report built out prior or immediately done after acquisition of your budget versus actual report, so that you can get a narrative where certain costs exceed your budgeted costs as to why they're exceeding your budgeted costs, and that you can provide that color to investors. And fundamentally, at the core of it, have a trust but verify relationship with your property manager. They're trying to do a good job for you. They're working their tails off. And so you want to honor and value that commitment and integrity, but you want to verify everything that they're reporting, so that if mistakes are being made, that they're corrected for. And I've found that on some of the smaller properties that we have, that some expenses have been double billed or misallocated to our property when they should have been to another property. And so it was only through that kind of temporary or from time to time audit that we did on some of those expenses and verifying those expenses, were we able to uncover some of those mistakes. And so that's been a good kind of control to have for our investors.
Some good advice. So double billed or put on the wrong property. If you weren't looking at that probably weekly, you wouldn't notice it.
That's right. Yeah. It's something that could just have slipped through. And I have a good relationship with our property managers, and I don't for 1 second believe it was malicious or designed to mislead. It was a mistake. And so what we do is we just make sure that we're taking care of the mistakes.
What's the number one thing that contributed to your success, Patrick?
Just persistence. I'd really say persistence. And really, I'm a firm believer that you're not going to win the deal in a competitive situation by just putting out an offer and hoping that they accept it. It's going to come with the 10th or the 15th or the 20th phone call to make sure that they saw the offer. What do they want to do? How can we win it? And let's do this thing. It's that type of persistence that is going to help you win in competitive situations. And frankly, for the right deals, they're all going to be competitive. It's only through, and I've seen this with some of my partners, it's only through their very deep penetration within a market that they've been able to secure true off-market properties that are being sent to them that haven't been sent to anyone else. off market is typically a misnomer because you may be sent an off-market property, quote unquote, that's sent to 100 people. And so it's really with those deep penetrations in a market where you maybe have 1,000 doors or 2,000 doors that you're then being sent some of those true off-market opportunities. But it's because they were persistent in closing those 2,000 doors that they're able to get to that level. And so it builds on itself. But I wouldn't have closed on the over 500 units unless we were persistent and building relationships with people in the market, talking with people, as many people as we could in the market, and really getting a lay of the land, because that's when people start saying things to you that they may not otherwise would have. And just a final kind of example of that, and I learned this at a prior company I was with, is the importance of meeting with people. So if you're in a market and looking to invest in a market, go to that market and meet with all of the top brokers in that market. They will tell you about deals and opportunities that may not be on LoopNet or may not be on the MLS, or tell you about an owner that might be thinking of selling that no one else knows about. And they will generally tell you things that they wouldn't have otherwise told you over the phone because you're there with them. And it's such a powerful tool to, I think, build relationships and get opportunities. Just by going and visiting them in the market, you can really uncover an amazing amount of detail that you otherwise wouldn't have known about.
That's some great advice, Patrick. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but will you tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you or learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to spend time and talk with anyone that has questions. You can email me at pduffy32@gmail.com. It's my personal email. It's P as in Patrick, DUFFY, the number 3, the number 2 @gmail.com. And just shoot me an email. We'll set up a time to chat, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Patrick, for being on the show, and appreciate the listeners for being with us today. And we will talk to you all tomorrow.
All right. Thanks for having me, Whitney.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.